London, September 10th, 2025. The United Kingdom has issued one of its strongest warnings to Moscow yet, after Russian drones entered Polish airspace in what officials are calling the most direct violation of NATO territory since the war in Ukraine began. At the centre of the response was Britain's Defence Minister Healey, who spoke firmly at a high-level defence meeting in London with representatives of the E5 group, which includes France, Germany, Italy and Poland. The mood inside the room was described as tense but resolute, as European leaders grappled with a situation that threatens to drag the alliance even closer to direct confrontation with Russia. Healey opened the session with a blunt assessment of the events that unfolded overnight. He reminded his counterparts that this was no ordinary breach of airspace, but something that carried historic weight. Healey declared, "Poland's direct offensive military action last night is the first of its kind since Putin launched his illegal invasion in 2022. Defence Minister Kosiniak-Kamysz has rightly headed home to Poland very early this morning to deal with this attack. Russia's actions are reckless, unprecedented and dangerous. We totally condemn these attacks and we say to President Putin, your aggression only strengthens the unity between NATO nations. And we will discuss this morning what additional support we can provide to Poland." The words reverberated not just through the packed conference hall in London, but also across European capitals that have been watching Poland's tense standoff with Moscow with growing alarm. The Polish government confirmed earlier that dozens of Russian drones had crossed into its territory overnight, forcing Polish air defences to respond in what is now being described as the most significant direct clash with Russian military hardware on NATO soil since the Ukraine war erupted 3 years ago. Warsaw's Defence Minister, Kosiniak-Kamysz, immediately cut short his trip to London and flew back to Poland to lead the emergency response. His swift departure underscored both the seriousness of the situation and the uncertainty about what Russia's next steps might be. Poland has long been one of Ukraine's strongest backers, providing weapons, logistical support, and acting as a transit hub for Western aid flowing into Kyiv. But last night's escalation, officials say, has moved the confrontation onto an entirely new level, one that makes NATO's Article 5 security guarantees more than just a distant talking point. For Britain, the violation of Polish airspace served as a stark reminder that the war in Ukraine is no longer confined to the east. The threat now sits directly on NATO's borders. Healey's tone was a mix of condemnation and reassurance. While denouncing Russia's actions in sharp terms, he also sought to project unity within the alliance. By insisting that Putin's aggression only strengthens NATO unity, Healey framed the violation not as a test of Western weakness, but as a catalyst for greater cohesion. His words carried a deliberate message to Moscow. Rather than dividing the alliance, these provocations are forcing NATO to close ranks even further. The decision to convene the E5 meeting in London on such short notice demonstrated the urgency of coordinating a collective response. The group, often seen as a core bloc of NATO's European members, has become a crucial forum for discussing joint defence strategies, military aid to Ukraine, and deterrence measures against Russia. For analysts, the breach of Polish airspace was not entirely unexpected, but deeply troubling nonetheless. Since the beginning of the Ukraine war, Russian drones and missiles have strayed close to NATO borders, often prompting scrambling of jets or warnings from neighbouring states. But never before had Poland itself reported a direct military confrontation of this scale. Officials in Warsaw said the drones were not accidental strays, but part of a wider campaign of pressure by Moscow. By pushing the boundaries, Russia appears to be probing NATO's response threshold, testing how far it can go without provoking a full-scale alliance response. The timing of the incident has also raised eyebrows. It came just days after Russia suffered significant setbacks on the Ukrainian front, including the loss of several key positions near Kharkiv. Military experts suggest the drone attack may have been designed to distract and intimidate NATO, signalling that Moscow still has the capacity to spread instability far beyond the battlefields of Ukraine. Inside the London meeting, the challenge for European leaders was to balance firmness with restraint. NATO has long warned Russia that any attack on member states would trigger a collective response under Article 5 of the alliance's charter. Yet invoking that article carries the risk of plunging the West into direct war with a nuclear-armed adversary. For now, officials are signalling that Poland will not stand alone. Discussions are underway about bolstering air defences along NATO's eastern flank, deploying additional surveillance aircraft, and increasing intelligence sharing to ensure no further violations go undetected. Healey's reference to additional support for Poland suggests the UK is prepared to step up both militarily and diplomatically. London has already been among the most active European capitals in supporting Kyiv, and officials are signalling that its commitment to Poland will be equally firm. In Moscow, the Kremlin has so far remained silent on the latest incident, declining to confirm or deny the drone strikes. Russian state media, however, has sought to portray the reports as Western propaganda, claiming that Poland is fabricating or exaggerating the scale of the attack to draw NATO deeper into the war. This is a familiar playbook. Russia has repeatedly sought to blur the lines between intentional aggression and plausible deniability, often leaving its adversaries to debate whether incidents are deliberate provocations or unfortunate accidents. But in this case, Western officials appear to have little doubt. By describing the actions as reckless, unprecedented and dangerous, Britain and its allies are signalling that they view the event not as a miscalculation, but as a deliberate escalation. For many in the room in London, the events carried echoes of earlier Cold War confrontations. Poland, which sits at the geographic heart of NATO's eastern flank, has historically been both a frontline state and a symbol of resistance against Russian domination. The idea that Moscow would once again test Poland's sovereignty touches deep nerves in both Warsaw and across Europe. Since joining NATO in 1999, Poland has consistently argued for stronger deterrence measures against Russia, often warning that Moscow's aggression would not stop at Ukraine's borders. Last night's drone incident has reinforced those warnings with chilling clarity. The coming days will be critical in determining how NATO responds. Much depends on the results of Poland's investigation into the scale of the attack and the nature of the drones involved. Were they surveillance drones armed with explosives or designed to provoke without causing casualties? The answers could shape whether the alliance treats this as a near miss or a direct act of war. For now, the priority is to demonstrate solidarity. Statements of condemnation are being issued not only in London, but also in Berlin, Paris, Rome and Washington. Behind the scenes, military planners are drawing up contingency plans for a range of scenarios, from further drone incursions to more serious missile strikes. Beyond the geopolitics, there is also the human dimension. Residents in Poland's eastern regions reported hearing the buzzing of drones overhead during the night, followed by explosions as air defences responded. For many, it was a terrifying reminder that the war next door is no longer just across the border. Local officials have urged calm but acknowledged the psychological toll. In towns near the Ukrainian border, residents have grown accustomed to seeing NATO troops and military convoys. But the idea of Russian drones flying overhead marks a new and frightening chapter. For the UK, the challenge is twofold: to reassure its allies while also preparing the British public for the possibility of a deeper confrontation with Russia. Healey's words were carefully chosen to balance condemnation with reassurance. By highlighting NATO's unity, he aimed to show that Britain is not acting alone, but as part of a collective shield. London has already committed significant resources to supporting Ukraine, including advanced air defence systems, training programmes for Ukrainian troops, and intelligence sharing. If additional support for Poland is agreed upon, it could mean more deployments of British personnel and equipment to the Eastern Front. As the London meeting continues, one thing is clear: the violation of Polish airspace has jolted NATO into a new phase of urgency. The alliance is now forced to confront the possibility that the war in Ukraine is spilling irreversibly into its own territory. Britain's Defence Minister set the tone for the day with his uncompromising words. By calling Russia's actions reckless, unprecedented and dangerous, and vowing that NATO's unity would only be strengthened, John Healey delivered both a warning to Moscow and a reassurance to Poland. Whether those words are enough to deter further aggression remains to be seen. But for now, they serve as a stark reminder that the line between Ukraine's war and NATO's security has grown perilously thin.
Poland's direct defensive military action last night is the first of its kind since Putin launched his illegal invasion in 2022. Defence Minister Kosiniak-Kamysz has rightly headed home to Poland very early this morning to deal with this attack. Russia's actions are reckless, unprecedented and dangerous. We totally condemn these attacks. And we say to President Putin, Your aggression only strengthens the unity between NATO nations. And we will discuss this morning what additional support we can provide to Poland.